Good morning. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Can't hear myself, so I got to turn it up a little, just a tiny bit. I'm Dave Stump, ASC, BVK, and I'm here to talk to you about data-driven unified workflows. Did you ever wonder what would happen on a production if you had enough time to prep? Did you ever wonder what would happen on a production if you had too much time to prep? As if there's such a thing. So, a couple of years ago, I got offered a job on an Italian World War II movie about a submarine commander called Comandante. And we had way too much time to prep because we were in the heart of COVID, and the movie had not been greenlit, and getting a green light for the movie depended entirely on whether we could solve the visual effects problems of the film. So there's no pay involved, all the time you need, all the forethought that you need, and very little supervision by an interfering producer because he's not paying you, so there's nothing to interfere with. What I learned from that film is how much you can pull off if you have enough time and you give things enough thought. So Comandante was the opening film of the Venice Film Festival in 2023. And it seemed to be the perfect candidate at the time for an LED wall production. More than 30 pages of the script were set on the back of a World War II submarine at sea in the Atlantic Ocean. Getting a green light depended on solving the VFX problems. So we set off with the help of Habib Zarkapour to start doing some previs for the movie. We started prevising some of the scenes and some of the script. And we started as if we were going to use the LED wall and Unreal Engine. We quickly learned that the movie was going to be shot tentatively in anamorphic. So there were a lot of problems to solve. Many of the issues became obvious as we started prepping. Blue screen shooting was ruled out because of the foreground. It would be wet and splashes of water and ocean spray and just way too difficult a blue screen or green screen challenge. And we really learned a lot when we started doing tech viz of some of the scenes, trying to lay it out as an LED wall production. And after some time, we realized electricity and water don't mix. LED walls and water tanks especially would not mix. And it just became really, really obvious that even the LED wall solution was not going to work. The director wanted really long tracking shots and crane shots, and we just weren't going to get there with LED wall technique. So we began questioning the basic assumptions of the movie, both VFX and XR production. Could an LED wall final pixels approach be applied to more traditional compositing workflow? Could we find enough savings going forward to do 30 minutes of VFX work without blue screens, green screens, or an LED wall? So we enlisted the help of the foundry, who make a product called Nuke. And this pictured in this visualization is Dan Ring, who was then the head of R&D for the foundry Nuke and their compositing software. We knew we couldn't use LED wall, blue screen, or green screen. We tested a new piece of software from the foundry called Nuke Copycat, which is, I think it was the first time that I had practically used an AI program in a real production. And this is in 2022, 2023. The real physical and virtual worlds could be blended using rotoscoping to separate the foreground from the background and to do matting using an AI algorithm. And this is part of what we learned because we had enough time to do the R&D on Nuke Copycat that because everyone was in COVID, Nuke gave us their entire R&D team to work on Copycat. It uses machine learning to determine what is foreground and what's background, and we train it by showing it a clear frame, and it interpolates the difference between foreground and background. So for quite some months, on a small stage in Ireland by remote control, we did testing of something that started off as a harebrained theory and ended up being a very practical approach that we just called no-screen photography. Not blue screen, not green screen, not LED wall, no-screen photography. I'm going to show you a little piece of movie here, and I'll point out what we're looking at. The top left is what you actually see on stage. The bottom left is the director's view from his chair of his monitor and what we see on the same stage in sync. The bottom right is a no-screen AI composite of a background with what you see on stage. And then the top right is a near real-time, alongside the set, redo of the composite using an AI algorithm called Claros. And when you see this work, the key thing to take away from this is that the director can see the composite, the camera operator can see the composite, the first assistant can see how to pull focus for the composite, and you can see a presentable editorial composite done 20 minutes later on the side of the set, all at the same time. I'm going to loop this a couple of times because I think it's a lot to take in. And if you don't get what you're seeing, you can ask me now, because this is really an important key part of the presentation, because this is all done live on set, except for the top right composite, which is done 15 or 20 minutes later, sitting next to the director. So because we had too much time to prep this movie, there were a lot of breakthroughs on this film. We discovered a lot of things and solved a lot of problems, and eventually we got a green light for the film based on the work that we had done developing. Everybody get a good enough look at that? So, real-time AI automation gives us the ability to live segment images, or in real time to segment images. And the key to this workflow is that you can segment these images, and then you can use another AI program to refine the matte edges of the rotoscope. And this is something that AI, as it turns out, is tremendously efficient at. So that was among our first breakthroughs, and that was what first gave us the idea that we had the possibility to succeed, and that we had the possibility to get this movie a green light without doing 30 minutes or 40 minutes of blue screen or green screen or LED wall. Second set of breakthroughs was motion tracking the camera. Even though we were not using an LED wall, it was important to motion track the camera accurately and to gather that metadata for Nuke to use in compositing the foregrounds that we shot on set to the backgrounds of the Atlantic Ocean at night. So we used Cook and a system from France called EasyTrack, which was extremely accurate tracking of the camera and of especially the entrance pupil of the lens as it moved through space. Because, as it turns out, the most important thing to track, all of the tracking that you do for the LED wall is in the name of tracking where the entrance pupil of the lens travels. Not the camera, not the cranes. Those are all the things that carry the entrance pupil. But the entrance pupil of the lens is the important point to remember, because that is the digital twin of a CG camera. And to do that, we used encoders and we used Vive trackers. And at one point, we even put an iPhone on the surface of the submarine so that we could track how much it was floating. The next challenge was to figure out the challenges of optics. So we were going to use anamorphic lenses. And if anyone here has ever used anamorphic lenses for CG or VFX purposes, you know it's a nightmare. When the first Star Wars was done, George Lucas shot the principal photography of Star Wars with anamorphic lenses. But the VFX team, John Dykstra and ILM, used VistaVision spherical to do the visual effects, and then they reduction printed it to 35 millimeter CinemaScope as a post-production exercise in order to avoid the major difficulties of anamorphic optics. An anamorphic lens employs cylindrical elements to squeeze the image, but the squeeze is only in the horizontal axis of the image, not in the vertical. And that presents some enormous complications. One of the complications is that an anamorphic lens has two entrance pupils, one in the vertical domain and one in the horizontal domain. And one has to be aware of both of those offsets to do CG with anamorphic lenses. As you pan, tilt, and roll, the parallax shift of objects in the scene shifts differently in the horizontal domain than it does in the vertical domain. Normally when you do a VFX movie, you shoot elaborate grids, and you shoot a grid for every lens, and sometimes you shoot them several times depending on whether the lenses get serviced during production. And that takes time and money, and it takes away from the assistant's time, and it costs you days of effort to track lenses. But we used Cook/I anamorphics that were already pre-measured with distortion and shading constants, and we tested that to be sure that it worked, and they were accurate to sub-pixel accuracy. So normally what you do is you shoot a grid chart, and the anamorphic lens distorts that grid to the sensor and gives you an image that looks distorted, something like this. Then you unsqueeze and undistort the grid chart in post-production. And then you re-squeeze after compositing. And instead of doing all of that automated nuke processing, we just use the Cook JSON distortion files to undistort, and it worked incredibly well. And as a demonstration of how well it worked, and for the purposes of undistorting on set in real time in live action, we created a little box, a little app in a computer that could take the output of the video tap off of the camera, and it could either undistort or redistort bidirectionally per lens, per serial number. So I'll show you a quick little movie to show what the value of that is. This is in real time through our video app with the Unreal Engine running in the background. So what we've created here is we took a camera case. This is at the Cook Optics headquarters in Burbank. We took a camera case and set it on the floor, pointed our camera at it with a Cook anamorphic lens on the camera, a 40 millimeter, and we shot a live action shot, but we used the Unreal Engine to recreate the camera box as a green shaded outline with CG gray shading and with CG Unreal logos stuck to the side. So that's real tape on the floor, an Unreal Engine green outline, Unreal Engine gray shading, and Unreal Engine logos on the side of the box. Now I'll play the movie for you, and you can see without the distortion correction turned on in real time what happens to an anamorphic picture. Clearly, the CG object does not track with the real world lens. The photography and the Unreal Engine are a total mismatch. Should I show that again? This is a really important distinction, and this is one of the great discoveries we made doing this show. See how the Unreal Engine box distorts differently than the anamorphic lens box distorts? Now I will show you the modern miracle. We turn on the distortion correction in real time. This is a live action shot, and we do the same test over again. And watch carefully near the end, we even threw in a rack focus. And you see that the Unreal Engine box completely matches the live action box? We calculated that was within 3/4 of a pixel of accuracy, which is plenty close enough for visual effects work. And it even works when you rack focus. I have to reiterate, this is nothing short of a modern miracle. Is there a question? I think we need a mic for a question.
Hi, was the first example undistorted using the old conventional way with the grids?
The first example, the previous slide, was no undistortion at all. It was just a straight double exposure of the Unreal Engine and the live action. I'll play that again. This is just a straight DX through QTake. So we're seeing the output of the Unreal Engine as it comes out, and the output of the anamorphic lens from the camera as it comes out, and we just slap them over each other. No distortion correction applied.
Thank you.
Then the second slide, we turned on our distortion correction, and we did the same thing. Just a straight DX of the Unreal Engine with distortion correction applied to it to match the lens.
I have a question. The distortion correction with the Unreal Engine and with the grids, Is there any difference in the end in the quality, or is it similar?
The distortion correction applied through Nuke
For Nuke, yeah.
is probably in the neighborhood of 2-ish or 3-ish pixels of accuracy. The accuracy changes from the center of the frame to the corners of the frame, and it gets a lot less accurate near the corners of the frame. In the case of using the ST maps created from the cooked JSON files, it was uniformly under 1 pixel of accuracy from center to corners of frame. So it's vastly, vastly more accurate. I'll show that again because it takes a while for this to set in. It takes a while to appreciate this for the miracle that it is, because we have not had this kind of control over anamorphic lenses since 1950, when we began using anamorphic lenses.
Dave, is it possible to do such work with other lenses?
Yes, it is, but you have to extremely accurately quantify the lenses, and you have to create a JSON ST map, and you have to use it in the distortion correction algorithm. But you can do this with any lens if you have the ST map. You could probably do it with the bottom of a Coke bottle if you had to. I'll play this one more time just because, to me, I know what it took to get here, and this is nothing short of a miracle. Watch the rack focus. That means you can do real focus driven by data in CG.
What kind of data are you taking from the lens or for this?
If you go over, I think Sigma have a new series. If you go to Zeiss and look, everyone who has those 4 little connectors on the back of the lens that has the /I logo on the outside of the lens can give you this data in real time. It's focus, it's shading, it's even zoom if you're using a /I zoom in real time. It gives you the f-stop. So, armed with that...
Sorry, Dave, just a last question.
Yes.
Have you been using that with the zoom from Cook?
No, I've been using it with a Fujinon zoom.
And so, does it work well?
Yeah, it actually... one of my commercial clients, you know who it is, the glue guys in Florida, have a 28 to 100 Cook lens, and I routinely use the data off of that. Although I mostly use that lens as a variable prime. I rarely do zooms. You, Philippe, you know how much I don't like zooming during a shot. So, now that we could apply this data on a frame-by-frame basis in real time, we could show real-time composites of anamorphic images to the director with the CG Unreal Engine background tracked into the shots and composited using QTake. We did, once we figured out all of these factors, we did a quick test for the director and the producer. This is Tim from Easy Track. And we just did a QTake pan and tilt DX of an Unreal frame with Tim in the foreground, ostensibly standing on the deck of the submarine. And that's the little movie that got the film a green light. So the next question was, can we extend that success to the other tools of filmmaking, like the cranes, the dollies, and especially the techno crane? So the next thing we did was we went to Group TSF in Paris, and Danny, who runs Group TSF, gave us a techno crane in a room, and we set up a CG object in the middle of the room, and we proved with this movie that the operator, the director, the DP, and most importantly, the first assistant cameraman who had to turn focus, could see the CG object in real time in the moving image. A thing to watch as you watch this little movie is that the first AC is focusing on this CG object that isn't really there, using his onboard monitor and his normal focus tools. So he can see how to focus on this CG object. Notice that the background is going out of focus correctly. Even the CG object is obeying the rules of focus. And this is all in real time. Thank you to Danny Bruyere of Group TSF. So we can take these files from these lenses as JSON ST distortion maps and plug them into the compositing software and do near real-time composites on set or near set. And we can take copycat AI algorithms and apply them to the foreground images that are just shot against whatever background is there. Splashes of water, people shooting muzzle flashes, smoke, spray, and we could composite that in near real time and refine it alongside the set using a composite workstation. And we could show those comps to the director, and we could record those comps, and instead of sending blue screen or LED wall footage to post-production, we could send near real-time finished composites approved by the director. So you finish a take, the director says, "I like that take. Let me look at a near real-time comp." So the top left is what the director sees while he's working on set. He can adjust the ocean, he can adjust the distant ships, he can adjust all of the CG ocean, all of the CG objects. He can get what you see on the bottom right as a near set real-time comp. And he can get a refined comp within a half an hour to an hour, and that's what goes to editorial. So the editor no longer has to imagine what's supposed to be in the scene. The director has already put what's supposed to be in the scene there, on set. I think I have a question over here. I see a hand waving wildly back there.
Thank you. I have a question. How is it defined what should be rotoscoped and what not?
Whatever you want in the foreground should be rotoscoped so that it can be placed over the top of a background.
So right now the Canon is rotoscoped as well, right? So it's not a CG on the near real-time rendering.
This is an interesting shot because we did versions of it both ways. Mm-hmm. And we ended up keeping the actual prop Canon.
So the director can decide while watching, saying like, keep the Canon.
Mm-hmm. And he can decide, move the sky a little further right. I want to see that bright area of the clouds. And he can say, make the ocean a little stormier. And if there's a ship in the distance, he can say, bring the ship closer, or move the horizon. You know, there is complete control of everything being done with the engine as a background. I'll show you a quick little movie. How am I doing on time? Yeah, I'm okay. So this is what it looks like shooting this on set. And Copycat can pull out all of that spray, whereas if you did it against a blue screen, it would be impossible. And if you did it against an LED wall, it would be an electrical nightmare. No. So you can see all of the pieces that were generated in Nuke and the Unreal Engine and how they all got glued together. And these mats are pulled by an AI algorithm, which is bad news for thousands and thousands of rotoscope artists all over the world. So can you see the metadata running in the foreground in the DX frames of data on the left side of frame? That's all real-time data coming from the camera system being transmitted to Unreal Engine and through Unreal Engine Live Link onto Nuke in real time. A thing to notice in this movie is that focus is realistic and controllable. Now, when I say realistic, in the past, when we did composites, let's give you a rough example. If I was shooting from the front of a car over the hood to a person sitting at the steering wheel in a real car, let's say in the rain, and with a blue screen background, so if I racked focus from the actor through the back windshield to the blue screen, and I put in a background of the city at night in the rain, in order to make it look like the city going out of focus or coming into focus, it's a global shift in focus. So a CG artist sits there and says, it looks to me like that's the right amount of focus or defocus for the beginning of the shot and the end of the shot, and I have to hand animate the focus throughout the entire shot. Using the Cook coordinates and the Cook system, that's all recorded as real data, and you can calculate from where the focus is set and the T-stop how much in or out of focus any object in CG should be depending on its distance from the camera. So we have a real way to calculate focus now, not just to fudge it in CG. You can't imagine how important that is. So these are all things that we got to do These are all breakthroughs we got to make because we had too much time to prep this movie. Now there are dozens of companies that are creating AI rotoscoping algorithms, and I did this slide for NAB months and months ago. This slide, if I updated it, would be pages long now. I mean pages and pages. So here's what we discovered. We discovered we could shoot without blue screens. We could shoot without LED walls. We could shoot without green screens. There were other discoveries that we made along the way, and that's why we call this a unified VFX production workflow, because we now have a lossless continuity between prep assets, the things that we made at the start of the movie, our on-set assets, and our final VFX assets. And I'll get to why that's important later. It gives us seamless integration between live action production and visual effects assets. So visual effects production now meaningfully begins in prep. There's no waiting for what we call VFX turnover. Does anybody do visual effects photography here? Normally what you do as part of the production process is the editor edits the whole movie, decides what's going to be in the backgrounds, and then turns things over to the visual effects company to start the compositing work. So that's a serial workflow. This has to happen, and this has to happen, and this has to happen, and this has to happen. And here's what those thises give you. This is the serial production workflow. You start off in development with the script, and you start building things in the art department, wardrobe, makeup and hair, sets and props. You have an entire development period, and that tells you what you're really going to do in production, which is extremely inefficient, because then you cross the analog abyss and you do it all over again to create on-set assets to do your visual effects from. And then you abandon all of those assets as you reach what we call the digital divide going into post, and you wait for visual effects turnover, and then you start all over again, recreating those assets that you've already created twice before in order to do the final comps. That's not necessary. If you can now use metadata and assets created in pre-production and throughout the entire production process, you cut out months and months of work. And this is all enabled by metadata. And those of you who know me know that I've been on the soapbox about metadata for over 20 years. I'm finally seeing the dream come true. What we've always done in the past was what I call meta paper. If you wanted to know what lens was on the camera in any given shot, you wrote it down, you put it in a notebook or several notebooks or camera notes or script notes. You put those on a shelf in the production office and you hope you can find them later, and you hope that somebody wrote it down right. That's meta paper. But now we're automating that process, and the lenses and cameras and post-production workflows are automating the capture of that data, and there's no human error. A 50 millimeter lens reports itself as a 50 millimeter lens. It tells you exactly where it's focused. It tells you what its t-stop is, and data doesn't lie. It's automated. So when you cut out the middleman or middlewoman, you reduce the amount of error possibility, and you make, more importantly, you make the data immediately accessible. And this is sort of dictated that we do something about carrying that metadata from the beginning to the end of the show. So there is a new development underway in the open source community at the Academy and at several other software vendors called USD, Universal Scene Description, which is a database file container that's set up in prep, and it's used to preserve and convey digital assets throughout the entire production process. So you keep the same USD database running from the day you write the script until the day you archive the movie and beyond. Because if you've got all of your data in a USD file, if you're Ridley Scott and you go back 5 years later to do the director's cut of your movie, you can find everything. This gives you seamless integration between live action production and VFX assets. Comprehensive metadata is captured and used usably, including production design assets, camera movement data, and lens metadata movement data from day one of the production. So really, VFX production begins in prep meaningfully because the assets you create in prep become the assets that evolve through the production instead of getting abandoned and recreated at every step of the way. The amazing part is that there's no waiting for VFX turnover if you do this. Circle takes from set are delivered as temporary comps. So if the director sees that cut and says go, the VFX vendors can begin a day into the shoot to start doing the final comps, rather than waiting until the movie is turned over as a finished cut. That's months of savings of time. In order to do this, you have to create contracts for your visual effects vendors and for the parties involved in the production that ensure that they know what format they're delivering, what specification they're delivering to, and how to make their files compatible with the unified workflow. But when you do, a visual effects vendor can take the data from the camera and from the set and from the crane and from all of the tools of filmmaking. And in visual effects, usually the first part of the process of doing a composite shot is to reverse engineer what happened on set. You do tracking and match moving. And for a difficult VFX shot, that can be half of the time you spend doing that shot. The artists are literally trying to figure out what the camera was doing on set. How was it being moved through space? How was the entrance pupil being moved through space? Because that's the digital twin of the CG camera. Figuring that out can very frequently be a half to a quarter of the work of doing a VFX shot. So I've done a little Gantt schedule here that shows that if you allocate 4 weeks for a shot, a difficult shot might require 2 weeks of tracking and match moving before you ever get to do the second 2 weeks of creative work to the shot. A less difficult shot might be a week of tracking and match moving and 3 weeks of creative work. And there are days of doing grids and quantification of lenses that have to happen in pre-production. And all of this Gantt chart starts after the movie has been cut and delivered for VFX turnover. Can you imagine that if you hand over the tracking and match moving data and the nuke artist plugs it in and it works, and that takes 1 day, and that 1 day happens a week into the editing process, how much time you're going to save on delivering the movie and doing the VFX? Can I let that soak in for a second? If you start delivering your final VFX a week or two into the edit process, you can deliver the movie so much faster in a day and age when producers are looking everywhere for savings, the best place these days that they know how to find savings is to beat me up for my day rate, or to beat up the hardware vendors for their cameras and their cranes and their props and their sets, or to just beat people out of their rates for money and savings. That's what savings is for a producer. If you start taking this much time out of a production, that's an amazing new place to look for savings. So I'm going to let you read this slide because these are the fundamentals of what I call the unified production workflow. USD scene description has to, universal scene description database has to be set up at the start of the show. You've got to capture all of the comprehensive metadata that's available, and there's now a mechanism to pass it on meaningfully without deleting it. You can do near real-time, near set, and offline VFX production using AI. You don't wait for VFX turnover. Post-production begins when the director calls cut, and editorial receives director-approved VFX temp composite shots as dailies during production. All of this discovered out of one film where we had too much time, almost a year and a half, to figure out how to do the film. It was a very productive effort. Now I think, do I have any time left for questions? Yeah, I've got a few minutes, I think.